Hi all, what a beautiful day it is. The vibe all around tells us a beautiful tale which is truly unforgettable. We are ready to kick off this event with our wonderful panelists. But firstly, I am Abdullah Al Bahey, a co-founder of Nomad Buddy, and I shall be your host for today. At Nomad Buddy, we are building an ecosystem for digital nomads in this tiny, beautiful island, Sri Lanka. We are working on a mission to create seamless travel and work experience in this wonderful island, Sri Lanka, for the people who live their life to the fullest. So, are you excited to know how we are building this wonderful ecosystem? So, stay up to date with our social media pages and by just Googling Nomad Buddy as well. Something special is within a month for our global citizens. So, without further ado, on behalf of our team, we warmly welcome all of you to this content filled discussion full of vibrant and excitement. I'm 100% sure that we will get the legal clarity we need in our digital nomad journey and leave the confusions behind. So let us now get into the discussion and sink our minds in the depth of insights. So we organized this legal 101 with our partner YVLC. YVLC works remotely to deliver affordable, high quality legal support with short turnaround times. So they are supported by a network of 20 plus highly experienced lawyers from India and across the globe to help improve access to legal services for businesses. So now let's look at a quick video of YVLC.
I hear them whispering about the places that you've been and how you don't know how to keep your business clean.
All right. So we have two very special guests today as our panelists who will be sharing their thoughts and experiences as insight with us. So first of all, we have Ryan Mendonca, the digital nomad lawyer revolutionizing legal services for startups. So Ryan founded your virtual legal counsel, which is YVLC, a legal tech solution for startups, solopreneurs, and SMEs. So he has extensive experience in various sectors such as corporate IP lawyer who can help businesses with everything from drafting contracts to managing their IP. So Ryan works with startups and founders across America, Africa, Dubai, India, and the EMEA region. So he has an impressive track record, having worked with startups and established corporations with global reach. So Ryan is also the founder of the Dubai Legal Professionals UAE Group, a community of lawyers and law students in the UAE to network globally. So he actively mentors as well for young lawyers and early stage startups. So frequently giving talks at law schools and incubators. So without further ado, let's get Ryan to the screen. Right. Hi Ryan. Good evening.
Hi, Bahey. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. I'm happy to be here. Excited for
Awesome.
this session.
Yes, me too. And let's have our next panelist to the screen right now. So it's none other than TUSHAR MEHRISHI, an Airbnb super lawyer and super host who knows how to spread love and hospitality wherever he goes. So with a passion for travel and love for self-care, after 15 years of successful journey as a corporate lawyer, Tushar has taken the plunge to pursue his passion full time of running vacation rentals under his brand Casa Lantato with the first three homes and many more he plans to share the world with. So, in addition to his passion for hosting, Tushar is also a partner of YVLC.legal, where he is building the prop tech vertical and serving client in the co-working, co-living, fractional ownership, vacational rental, and hospitality industries as well. So, with his extensive legal background and experience in these areas, Tushar is uniquely positioned to provide top notch services and support to his clients in the exciting and ever evolving world of prop tech. So, come on in, take a deep breath, and let's take Tushar to the show and let's welcome him as well. Hi, Tushar.
Hey, thank you so much for your kind words. I think you're too kind. That was too nice an introduction.
Awesome.
And like Ryan said, we're very excited to be here and to do this session.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, exactly. We too are super excited and looking forward for great things. I think we, at the end, as we love to deliver the 100% clarity of what our audience need. So we are on the track and like we'll go ahead further. So we'll have two round of questions. So first we'll start the question with Tushar. So, so this has been in many issues coming around the globe. So, based on the legal regulations, what actually digital nomads and remote workers should know. So, Tushar, can you tell us like what are the most important legal regulations and digital nomads and remote workers should know? So that is, I think, the main pain point that we are facing, and we have to overcome that one. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, Bhai. So thank you for the question. So sure. So I think there's a whole sort of multitude of legal laws and regulations you need to be sort of mindful of as a digital nomad or remote worker, ranging from taxation law to visa and immigration law, labor law, privacy law, intellectual property law. So lots of obvious ones. I'm happy to sort of, as an answer here, sort of give a little bit of an overview of each of those, starting with taxation laws. So I think as you sort of work out of different countries, you need to be really mindful of the length of your stay and the amount of money you're generating, because you might be required to pay taxes in the country where you're working. It could be relating to how long you've been in that country. It could be also relating to how much income have you generated. It could be relating to both. So that's sort of one thing to keep in mind. The second thing to keep in mind, very obviously, is the visa and immigration law. Different countries have different sort of ways of welcoming people who are sort of traveling into their country for work. Some would allow you on a business visa, some would require a special work permit. There could be regulations which limit the kind of activities you do when you are in on a certain visa. So you need to be a little mindful of that. You could be a digital or remote worker in a certain industry. You could also be somebody who's gone into a country to sort of do a little bit of a freelance gig. And then it would look a little different. Maybe the regulation then or the sort of the visa requirements then are slightly more nuanced than if you are going in for a traditional job where typically somebody is sponsoring your visa. So that's sort of the second bucket. The third is data privacy, which is, of course, a big buzzword across the world, especially across India at the moment, given all the back and forth on the privacy law. So as you know, whether it is the GDPR in the EU or the California Custom Privacy Act in the US, or of course the data protection law, which is being rewritten in India, each of those address how personal sensitive information, private information should be treated, how your information will be stored, processed, and therefore that's something to be very mindful of. Now, sometimes it's in the fine print of these regulations, and therefore it's good to get external advice. It's good to sort of understand the nitty-gritties of it if you are doing work which involves sort of processing a lot of sensitive personal information. The fourth bucket would be labor laws. In every country, whether it's the Fair Labor Standards Act in the US, or it's the multitude of labor laws in our country, or it's also labor laws in some of the APAC countries, which could get a little complicated in relation to minimum wages or the working hours, or even rights of workers. Sometimes that's a big thing which the International Labor Organization is looking into. So you need to be a little mindful of those laws and regulations from a labor law perspective as well, because sometimes you could be doing some work remotely and you could be entitled to a certain wage. You could also be sort of, as your work progresses, having somebody work for you in that foreign country, and therefore that person would be required to be paid a minimum wage. The last couple of buckets are intellectual property law and travel restrictions. I think on travel restrictions, we all know we faced it with the COVID-19 pandemic. There were very, very robust restrictions in many, many countries, which sort of eased away as the pandemic sort of withdrew. Even today, There are different requirements in different countries which you need to be mindful about. And therefore, it's always good to sort of go on to the foreign ministry website of that country and find out that are there any new restrictions, and also given that there has been a surge in COVID cases again. And intellectual property rights, sort of a wide gambit in itself, but essentially, you should be aware of all the laws around, trademark, copyright. If you're looking to create your own work and sell it, then that could have certain sort of limitations. And IPR law could look a lot different than you're used to or from where you come from, right? So that's something you need to be mindful of as well. So I think these are the 4, 5, 6 broad sort of legal laws which you need to be mindful about. And I hope this is useful and gives a good overview.
Of course, of course. So it's a lot of information, I guess, we have to follow there, because when we are traveling to different countries, there are different legal laws, as you said. Now we have to follow. It can be, say, the visa processes, or like work visas. There's a different work permits. So as we said, like it's a vital part. Like everyone have to know what actually we have to follow. Based on the legal aspect, because you are traveling from one country to another country using the resources, and working with that one. So it's crucial that you have to know that one, and you have to adapt that one, or else definitely it's going to bring some chaos in our journey, right? So of course, like right, so we can move on to the next question. So what we can see here. So Ryan, the question is for you right now. So Ryan, can you
Yeah.
tell us, like, what are some legal issues that normally digital nomads and remote workers face? Because you have a good enough experience as a digital nomad yourself, traveling to different countries and experiencing. So you should definitely have that experience. And as a person who works in the law firm as a lawyer again, so you should definitely have in-depth idea about it. So let's hear from you, Ryan, on that one.
Sure, absolutely. Happy to do that. I think we do have a few slides prepared for this
Sure.
session.
Yeah,
So
let's
let's
share that.
have that so that our viewers can follow along.
Awesome.
Let me share screen. Let me know y'all can see this.
Yes, Ryan. Yeah.
Great. All right. So here's my questions, right? Common issues for legal issues, right? And the digital nomad uh, people face, and also remote lawyers or remote workers face, right? So just to dive deep and go further into what TUSHAR mentioned, right? Because whilst at the same time, there are certain things that you need to be aware of, right? And here are about the issues that you can that can stem from those, right? If they're not taken care of well. So we have taxation issues, right? So just as Tushar mentioned, determining which country you're tax resident in, because you could be living in a country for a few months or a few weeks at a time, but not necessarily be tax resident there. So the only tax you would need to pay is the direct local taxes for things that you purchase there, right? You won't be required to pay any other taxes. But at the same time, complying with tax laws in different jurisdictions can be complex and confusing. And that's why you need to make sure where your tax residency status exists. And that tax residency status usually depends on the amount of time or the duration of your stay in a certain location. Right? At the same time, digital nomads also need to navigate different complex tax treaties. This is to avoid A, double taxation, and B, to make sure that they're paying the appropriate amount of tax in the accurate country or accurate jurisdiction. Right? Now, moving on to visa and immigration issues. So this is something that is super important for digital nomads, because one is that it can really hamper your journey, right, to wherever it is. And we've seen in multiple cases, people have either had issues with their visas. They've not applied for the visas with the proper documentation, and it's caused a lot of loss of money, right? Because sometimes you booked a ticket, but you've reached the airport and you're about to board your flight or check in, and you can't do it because of your visa issues that you have. There are certain issues where you even have where you've been in a country and you unknowingly overstayed your visa, right? So it's important to obtain the necessary visa and per work permit, whether it requires you to work in that country and allows you to work in that country. So sometimes you, instead of getting a tourist visa, you may want to opt for a business visa in certain circumstances, especially if you're not only working remotely, but especially if you're going to be meeting officials, meeting people, and you'll be out and about in a more commercial aspect versus you going as a tourist and exploring things of that nature. Next, a couple of issues with regards to intellectual property. So I've been an IP lawyer pretty much the majority of my legal career, and it's important to understand for digital nomads or remote workers that generally speaking, the IP that you create, the copyright that you have over any type of document or video or content that you create is yours to begin with. So it's important to have proper contracts that give the respective parties, maybe it's a work for hire, maybe somebody's hiring you to do some travel content. So you have to have a contract with that person so that person or company or brand has the rights to exploit your intellectual property in the appropriate manner, right? And at the same time, digital also need to know how to protect their own intellectual property rights, such as getting patents for, let's say, they are building some new inventive product, right? There are a lot of indie hackers and builders that are building very creative new things. They need to know how to protect them with patents and trademarks and copyrights over their design and all the elements of the product that they're creating. The last couple of issues are along the lines of data privacy and contract and employment issues. So just to breeze over data privacy issues at the moment, digital nomads who work with sensitive personal data or and even financial or health data of all their clients or customers or people that they've been in contact with, they need to make sure that they comply with the data privacy and security laws in different jurisdictions. And for the most part, you would find that it's difficult, especially when it comes in regards to people that are working or are of EU background, people that are from California, because these are jurisdictions that have very strong regulations with regards to data privacy. So complying with different data privacy and security regulations can be challenging, especially if because these regulations aren't consistent in different jurisdictions. So because they vary, it's best to try to get either some sort of a international hosting, some sort of a way in which you are able to have all the data backed up in the cloud as well as with you on your physical device, right? The fifth point and last point for this question is regards to contracts and employment. So when it comes to digital nomads that keep traveling and working in different places, where are they employed, right? Are they employed where their client is, or are they employed where their company is based out of, or where in which they're working, and which employment or labor laws apply to them, right? That's why it's important for those things to all be spelled out in the contract, right? So you could be, an American that's working for a German company and be living in Thailand, right? Now, so long as the contract with that company mentions that your labor law is as per German laws, those are the benefits that you're privy to be getting, right? Similar situation happens when you're either you have a digital marketing agency, or you have a contract with a client that you're working with. So I think this sums up pretty much the question. Over to you, Bahey.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super insightful. Like I can figure out now, like how many issues that as a digital nomad or a remote worker they have to face. We have to face, coming through our journey. Right. So, as you also mentioned about the taxation and related contents, right? So, let's jump into another question. Like, so, what are the tax implementations of working remotely, and like, how can the workers navigate these complex areas? So, Ryan, can you follow up on this one?
Sure, I'm happy to do that, right? So, in terms of tax implications, remote workers may have to pay taxes in multiple jurisdictions. There are multiple factors that affect it, right? Which, for one, is what your nationality is, what your tax residency is, how long you've been in a certain jurisdiction, and where you're earning money from, right? Where your income is being generated from. So these are the tax implications for remote workers, and taxes may be due to the country where you're physically located as well, right? So just as I gave you the similar example, of course it's different for in that example because Americans are taxed globally. So irrespective of where they live, where they're working from, and who they're working with, they are taxed globally. But with regards to any other sort of nationality, right, people from other backgrounds, they're usually taxed for the majority where they are registered as a entity or where they've registered and are employed with someone, right? So long as they don't overstay or understay their limitations in terms of being non-resident in that certain jurisdiction, then that's their tax residency, right? And it's also important to understand that double taxation can occur when a worker is taxed in the same country, in multiple countries for the same income, right? Because you're paying tax on what someone is paying you, and at the same time, you're paying tax on that income at the same time, right? So there can be multiple taxations, and it's important to figure what those are and how to maneuver through those, right? Sometimes it makes sense to, so ways of navigating these tax implications is one, of course, trying to have an entity, right? So that distances your personal income tax from your corporate tax, right? Or your corporate income. And that way, irrespective of where you are or where you travel or where you're based out of, your tax residency remains with where you've incorporated your corporate entity, right? And it's important at the same time to keep accurate records of income and expenses, right? Because if you have this entity, you can then set off those expenses with your income, right? Because then you only, for the most part at least, be paying corporate income tax with from that jurisdiction that you've been registered in. And when it comes to keeping records, it's always advisable to have a billing system or some sort of online tool that you're able to invoice people, generate those invoices, make sure those are paid, and it's all logged easily and accessible for you, right? It's very, very difficult if you're doing this manually by yourself, putting serial numbers and changing different details, right? So it's important to use a platform that you can help with. When it comes to tax incentives, that's there in certain countries, right? So some countries offer tax incentives to attract remote workers, right? For example, Portugal, they have an incentive scheme where you can be a non-habitual resident, right? So that allows you 10 years of a reduced income tax rate. Similarly, there are multiple other countries that are doing that. You can see that in the Bahamas, you see that in Bali, you see that in many jurisdictions that are giving tax jurisdiction, tax incentives for remote workers, digital nomads to come and set up their company or work from there. Even Estonia offers a e-residency program that allows remote workers to set up a company and access favorable tax rates. The last bit is the tax compliance, right? So tax compliance from one perspective is just filing the returns. But at the same time, if you fail to comply with these tax laws, it can result in multiple penalties, fines, and also maybe even potential legal action. So it's very, very important that you make sure that your CPA, your accountant, and also your lawyer are all working together, right? And it's it's very coincidental that we're doing this on the last day of the financial year, right? So everybody, it's important that you make sure that you stay up to date with also changes that are happening. So, for example, keep tabs on where your jurisdiction is and what are the tax laws that are changing in that jurisdiction. And don't feel afraid or hesitant or even shy away from spending money for professional advice, because these are the important things that you have to prioritize in your digital nomad journey, because it can put a big blip in your journey and can make things difficult. And that's not what you want, especially when you're trying to be free and travel and experience all that life has to offer. Over to you.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ran. As you said, like, when we are traveling around, when we are experiencing and when we want to live that life of freedom, so we definitely have to be, have to have that understanding, right, of what are the things that we have to follow, or else our freedom life will sometime end up with some chaos again. So
Oh,
it's
for
of
sure.
course, yeah, of course, it's an essential part to know, what are the things that we have to follow, especially when it comes to taxations. Some countries offer double taxations; they just get it double taxations, and some just normal. And in sometimes you can maybe knowing these taxation related in things can be beneficial. Because some countries offer less tax, and like countries like Dubai don't even get a tax from the people who are coming. So it is something essential to know where we are going to go and like how the games are being played, so then we
Yeah,
can be smart enough to work and get the things done. All right,
absolutely.
awesome. Yes. To continue on this one, again, I think Ran is the right person. Tushar will come to you on the next question. But like, Ran, can you tell us like how can digital nomads and remote workers ensure that they comply with all these laws and like especially local labor laws and regulations of the country they're staying in? Because country to country it may be different, having different. So how can they get know about these things and stay accordingly?
Sure. Happy to elaborate a little bit more on that, right? So, with regards to how digital nomads and remote workers can ensure compliance, one is doing your research, right? There's no second answer for or better answer than you doing your own research, and then at the same time vetting that research is correct or valid and up to date, right? With local professionals, right? Either having someone who specialized in employment and labor law, or having a run-of-the-mill lawyer who's familiar with employment and labor law to look over that, right? So one is, of course, getting your employment status approved, whether it's having an offer letter, and making sure that that says what it needs to say, that allowing you to work from anywhere or work from a specific location, but from home or remotely, right? It's important that you don't give either your employer or at the same time your clients or customers the opportunity to point a finger at you, because on one side, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you have a issue with your employer, because that's where your income is coming. That's what's allowing you to travel for the most part, and it's also supporting probably your other expenses and family, right? So that is something that you absolutely want to make sure that you're always taking care of. And at the same time, when it's with regards to clients, you want to keep a good reputation with them, right? You don't want them to have an opportunity to point the finger or put you in bad light, right? So from one side, it's important to understand this employment status, have all your documents, your appraisal letters, or your employment contract, any sort of commissions that you may be getting for services that you're doing or sales that you're getting. It's important to have everything clear, especially when it's something that your employer has told you but is not reflected in your contract. That should raise a red flag for you, and you should try to your level best to work that in writing, right? And at the same time, trying to stay up to date with labor law changes is difficult, I would say, especially if you're traveling and you have 150 other things that's going on. But what would be good is to subscribe to certain official newsletters from certain ministries that are um, covering the labor and employment related issues, and that way you'll get up to date feedback on what's happening in your jurisdiction, that you have to maintain local laws, right? And I would say the last and most important thing is really to understand the differences in culture, right? Because as you're a digital nomad or you're a remote worker, you should understand different cultures and how it may impact with local labor laws and regulations, right? Some things that you may do that your employer in UAE is completely fine with, your employer in Brazil may not like, right? So it's important to understand how that organization works, understand the pulse of your colleagues, and just make sure that you have a very positive and active attitude towards working, especially making sure that your vacation time, your working hours, and all of that is being taken care of in a very well planned manner. Because as I mean, I've been noticing of recent that a lot of companies are moving away from remote working, moving away from work from home. It may just be, news propaganda, but a lot of it is true. Many companies now that COVID is over, it's been a couple of years since everything has come back to some sort of normalcy. Um, Employers are requiring people to come back to work from office, right? So it's important that you understand all of this and take it in stride, right? And not let it get the best of you.
Exactly. You're 100% right. So, because as you said, the important part, the culture, understanding different cultures, experiencing those things. So that's actually a part of being a digital nomad. So, traveling to those countries, also, working or having some time with the locals will give more understanding on how they are, living their lives, how they're experiencing what unique culture, maybe unique food, right? That they are having a part of their culture. So tasting those things also is something important that can give more experience and some unique values to our life to understand those things. So, as Ryan said, consulting some professionals, of course, the audience can reach out YVLC as their consultants as well. That's what they are providing to their clients, and they are more than happy to help you out through the processes. And also, if the audience have any questions, so feel free to put in comments on the LinkedIn Live that we are going through. So we'll capture it to the screen and answer your questions as well. So it's the stage is up to you again, right? So I think Tushar is being silent for a while, and let's get him to the stage now. And Tushar, I have a question for you. So what legal considerations, should digital nomads and remote workers consider when working with clients or businesses in other countries, specifically the country that they are working without the country that they're staying, right? So they may stay in a country, but the clients or the business will be in different countries. So how do they align those things and how do they work with that?
Yeah, sure, and no problems in being quiet. I think Ryan's really better place to answer a lot of these questions, because I think just for the benefit of everyone listening, he's practically living this life at the moment and doing quite a smashing job at it. I think in terms of legal considerations when working with clients or businesses in other countries, there are several things to sort of keep in mind. I'll go one by one. I think the first one and the most important one is just the contracts you sign, right? I think it's very important to outline the terms of the work. I always say that a contract has three main things, right? Your scope of work, what the payment arrangement is going to look like, and what does it mean if things were to go south, right? So I always tell people who sort of reach out to me for counsel that these are the important things in a contract, right? And no exception here, that you must outline what work you're doing clearly. You must be very careful about how you're wording your payment terms. Are they contingent on something? If yes, and what are those things? And of course, any other relevant details, like I said, that, if what is your exit right, if there is one, and things like that, right? I think the second one is intellectual property rights. I think any digital nomad or remote worker would not be doing justice to sort of their way of working if they're not aware of the intellectual property rights in the country they're working with, where the client's actually based. So there could be very often a situation where, you're very accustomed to the law as it is in your own country, but you have clients working in different countries where the nuances of the patent law, the copyright law could look a little different, and therefore you need to obviously understand that very well, right? The third one is data protection and privacy. I think this is a common, popular, much talked about theme across even most of our slides. And like I said, that I think the most important part of this whole sort of privacy gamut is that understanding how your data is collected, then stored, and then processed, right? And of course, then there are things there could be people who are working where there is a lot of data sort of crunching involved and a lot of sensitive data, and then there could be situations where not so much. But irrespective, it is important to understand that how is that done. And the most important aspect, of course, of any data law, data privacy law, is the cross-border data transfer, that when you are sending data across, then, what are the implications of that? Have you sort of checked up that what it means to sort of send that data over? How will it be protected in the other jurisdiction? And if there were to be a breach, then how will that breach be addressed, right? And this is where sort of experts come in. And thank you for the plug earlier, but we are happy to sort of be those experts for you, be those sort of eyes and ears to help you out. I think tax implications, Ryan has covered extensively. So I'm going to sort of skim over that one. Compliance with local law and regulation. I think, I say this a lot. I used to say this even when I was legal counsel for leading companies, that, it's so important to understand what the local law and regulation is. And sometimes there could be a presumption that it's a little bit of, very similar to the law where one comes from or the one understands, but there could be those finer nuances which you will sort of miss if you don't sort of, understand it well, understand it through an expert. And then, of course, the compliance bit. Just one more thing I would like to add, when Ryan was talking about taxation earlier, I think the one thing I've been noticing is that there's also been a lot of follow-up by authorities, right? So one is that it keeps changing and evolving and you have to be aware, but the other is that I'm seeing an uptick in just the sort of the enforcement of the law, and how the compliance burden, especially on the taxation side, is increasing, right? So I think it's really, really important, therefore, and I always, joke, I think I've said this to Ryan many times in the last couple of years, that, you're a lawyer and then you're a tax lawyer, right? So I think tax lawyers deserve a paycheck of their own. I think the last couple of points, dispute resolution, any sound lawyer would give you that advice that include an arbitration clause of a friendly sort of jurisdiction, which is sort of balanced and mutual, or of a legislation which you're familiar with. Like when we write contracts where Indian law is the governing law, we tell people that, you should, if this were to go to dispute, go to arbitration under the Arbitration Act in the country. Similarly, if the governing law is a jurisdiction which works for both sides, and then accordingly, the dispute clause should be written up. But it's a lot better, I think, to go to arbitration as a first recourse than go to courts. And the last one is professional liability insurance. I think, in today's sort of very fast and evolving world, you could be the subject of a legal claim. You could be the subject of somebody coming after you if they feel that their idea has been even partially stolen or anything like that. It could also be, this interest, and I think we'll cover that later in this talk, but from a sort of lots of digital nomads and remote workers work at shared spaces, and each of those shared spaces could have their own sort of requirements, right? And it's so important to get an insurance, professional liability insurance, because what happens if something were to go wrong at that co-working space, right? And you need to be protected because at the end of the day, you're just using that space to do your work, and no liability should sort of come on to you. So I think that's a little bit of sort of a gamut of, the considerations which you should, as a digital nomad and remote worker, consider. Just from personal experience, because Ryan and I have been working so closely, we have clients across the world, right? And so I think we are always sort of discussing and debating, when we are sort of helping clients in that part of the world, that do we know the law there enough? Who do we consult? Let's tap into one of our 20 experts around the world. Let's sort of brainstorm with them a little bit, because you can never know the law as much as an expert in that jurisdiction knows it. And I think that's very important. And I think that's what uniquely sort of positions us at YVLC. Back to you.
All right. Awesome. Yes. Thank you very much, Tushar, for that insightful answer again. So I think we need a small refresh from our side. So we have a small video. It's from Sri Lanka. So that's to portray how Sri Lanka is a welcoming country for digital nomads and anyone who is like to visit the country. So let's have a small look at the video and then come back again.
When you can go from sun-kissed to mountain mist in just 4 hours, that's so Sri Lanka.
When dolphins and whales swim around you all year so you can visit them at any time, that's so Sri Lanka.
When a bicycle ride in the countryside is one long roadside party of board games, quirky friends, and the world's best cup of tea, that is so Sri Lanka.
When every sunset is an aphrodisiac and the nights command you to dance them away, that's so Sri Lanka.
When you can marvel at elephants in the morning
and then meet some exotic birds, bears, and leopards for lunch,
that's so Sri Lanka.
When you can get an eye full of paradise and a heart full of adrenaline in a single afternoon,
that's so Sri Lanka.
When people brave dizzying heights to taste a buzz of fresh, warm toddy,
that's so Sri Lanka.
When feasting together makes you family, so we take every opportunity to indulge, that's so Sri Lanka.
When time slows down and urges you to as well,
so you can soak up the full magic of cultural treasures at every turn.
Storied street food made with love for 3 millennia.
360 degrees of ocean.
365 days a year.
Hugging lush forests, misty meadows, secret waterfalls, and ordinary Wednesdays.
That is so Sri Lanka.
When you surrender to every minute,
becoming your new favorite memory
on Earth's favorite island.
So wild.
So pristine.
So scenic.
So thrilling.
So spiritual.
So bold.
So colorful. That's so Sri Lanka.
Awesome. So that's so Sri Lanka, and I think Ryan,
Yeah.
you should have a great experience on Sri Lanka, and since you have been here, right?
Oh, that was beautiful. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's it was a beautiful video. It just sort of reminded me of all the times I've visited the beautiful country, and I can't wait to go back.
Of course, it's always a welcoming country, and we would love to see you again in the country as well. Right. So we have one question from our audience from LinkedIn. So I will pose this question to the screen. So for companies, I'm sorry I couldn't see your name, unfortunately. But the question is like for companies which encourage remote work but doesn't allow from a different country, what's the best practice to follow in this case if we are interested in working from overseas? So Ryan or Tushar, like who would love to take this question? I think Ryan. Yeah.
Sure, happy to take a stab at it. I think so long as your employer is welcoming to remote work, but they're not allowing it from a different country, I would say start with just like approaching anything, right? Start with baby steps. Um, Try it once, travel to a place, take work from, take remote work, let them know, keep them updated on the fact that you will be outside the country, you are not going to be on vacation, you are going to be working, and get that approval and consent in writing, and keep it a short trip, maybe, 5 days, 10 days, 15 days at max, right? That's one way of doing it and setting what we lawyers would like to call it as a precedent, right? And then over a period of time, you can try doing it again and again, and there you have it, right? So that's the way I would approach it because it's not something that you're going to get changed across the country, across the company or across the organization. It may just be a offhand exception that you're able to get because of the way you have a relationship with your manager, the way you have a relationship with the colleagues and people that you're working with. So try it, see if it works. That would be my approach.
Um,
But I'm
yeah,
sure Tushar has probably actually faced it with people at Airbnb that wanted to do it back in the day.
Yeah, sure. So if I understand the question correctly, I think it's like that these amazing global companies allow you to work remotely, which means work from the confines of your beautiful home or within your country, but don't allow you to sort of work from overseas. I think the short answer to that is that a lot of these incredible companies do have what we call rotation programs. They have interesting exchange programs where you can actually sort of write to a coworker and say, how would you feel about working out of our country and we can work out of yours, right? So I think it's a little bit about exploring what all a company has to offer. I think very often, and I say this out of a lot of sort of just knowledge about the incredible policies which a Google or a Facebook or an Airbnb put out. I think very often people presume that it's not true and that you can't do this, but they actually have lots of interesting sort of rotation programs or exchange programs, or the HR is able to do something for you if you go and have a conversation with them, right? Of course, they're very mindful because they're going to make one exception and they don't want it to become precedent. So it has to be kind of backed by reason. Situations like, if somebody can't, for example, health-wise just take the pollution and needs to work out of a different country, right, for cleaner air. Now, that's definitely something a marquee global company will sort of look out for and get done, right? So I think that would be my advice. But otherwise, the harsh reality is that you just have to hope that more and more companies sort of ape those big global companies and put out more friendly policies, which I'm sure is going to happen in due course, especially after everything which companies have learned during this absolutely life-changing last few years.
Yes, exactly. That summarizes what actually is needed by the companies all around the globe. Awesome. Thank you once again, Tushar and Ryan, for the answer. And we have another question. Say, like, what are the potential legal risks? Like, as you said, we have co-working spaces and co-living spaces around. So, what are the potential legal risks of using co-working spaces or shared accommodations with strangers in foreign countries? This could happen because we are going to stay with different people around the globe. We are going to work with them. So, what kind of legal risks can occur at these times, and like what kind of steps that we can take to overcome or mitigate these risks around? So, Tushar, I think you are the right person to answer this question.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I think we touched upon it a little bit earlier, so let's sort of dive into it. I'm always very distracted when my own picture is up on screen, so forgive me. I think, so, I think, like I said earlier, that, and of course, I think it's very, just right up front, right? I think it's amazing to be able to work out of co-working spaces. I think you sort of really melt into the culture and you meet people who you would otherwise not meet within the confines of your limited space. And therefore, of course, just out there, I want to put it there that you should do this. I think the right off top of my head, right? I think the one important thing is that you must sort of understand that no using any space is not free of risk, right? So you have to sort of familiarize yourself, and any shared space or co-working space, when you enter it, when you're going to use it, they're going to make you sign some documentation, they're going to make you sign some paperwork, right? So you need to be very clear about what that paperwork is saying, what kind of sign off is it asking you to provide. Is it a very broad sign off? It says that we won't be responsible if anything happens to your data, if there's any data theft. What does it talk about, if something were to happen for any incident or accident to take place at that premises, which has nothing to do with you, right? And so I think you have to be, I think you have to ask those questions. Again, I always tell people that, when in doubt, ask, right? And that's my sort of tip in life, right? Too young to give tips, but if I, whatever little experience I have, I think err on the side of caution, ask the question, right? So I think, so the potential liability of accidents or injuries that could occur on the premises, making sure that you are only signing paperwork you're comfortable with. Sometimes somebody will give you, any new space could give you a laundry list of things at which you're sort of signing off on, right? Very, very carefully, you have to read that and understand that what is it that they do, what is it that they don't do, what if you get into a dispute with that co-working space and stuff like that, right? And of course, also researching very well that what co-working space are you using, right? Some are better than the others. Some have sort of thought out various things which the others may not have thought out in terms of just privacy screens or in terms of just, sound protection or anything like that, right? Lots of us take things for granted and we presume that things are safe, our data is safe, our conversations are safe. But if the space isn't set up conducively to sort of protect all that, then maybe that presumption is wrong, right? So I think that's again something to be mindful of. And I think of course, if we've said this earlier, we'll say it again, that you have to be careful about the local laws and regulations. And when we say local laws here, it could be, as we've put out on this slide as well, that what are the zoning laws there, or what are the building codes, if any. I think building codes is sort of a more US centric word, where they could have, you could be in a neighborhood where fire and emergency services work differently and then other neighborhoods, and you have to be mindful of that. You could be in a sort of environmentally sensitive zone, and therefore something as simple as disposing your trash could be more detailed or more complicated, and you need to be mindful of that. I think the cultural nuances bit comes here as well, where you could be from a certain country and a certain culture, and you think that maybe something as simple as garbage disposal or something as simple as smoking or non-smoking areas doesn't need to be that complicated, but there could be sort of requirements in different countries where it is that complicated or it is slightly more nuanced, right? And within a country also, different spaces could operate differently. So just do your due diligence really well. I think that's a little bit I'll say. I know Ryan has worked many long hours out of some very funky co-working spaces in very enviable parts of the world. So I'm going to let him come in here as well.
Sure, Ryan.
Sure. Yeah. So it's been, I mean, over the past year, traveling, living in different places, in hostels, whether you have private accommodations, working out of cafes, working out of co-working spaces, it's been quite a journey. And I think some of the things that you need to make sure are that you have taken care of is one, the protection and security of all of your valuables, right? And it goes without saying, because no matter where you stay, no matter where you're working from, everywhere they're going to have like a disclaimer, or maybe not even put it out as a poster, right? But they're going to say, be careful of your belongings, don't leave stuff here, don't think, leave things unattended, and we're not going to be responsible, right? So that's something that is super important. So for the digital nomads, your main things are, your laptop, your phone, your wallet, your passport, and any important documents that you're carrying around with you, right? These are your main important stuff. Everything else, you can buy new stuff. You can, it can be replaced, right? Even if you're in a, let's say, a, very not so very secure and safe place, and something untoward might have happened and you were to be mugged or robbed, everything else is replaceable, right? So it's important to have that. And at the same time, because you're traveling, it's important to have insurance over these things, right? Have your laptop, phone, and all these things insured, because there are situations where it breaks, it goes, gets lost or stolen. You can report everything, but if you're not going to get it back, the very least you can do is have your insurance provider provide you some sort of money that's going to provide you some sort of relief. You may not be able to get the data back, right? But that comes to my next point, which is making sure that all your important, confidential, and things that you're working on, right, is all saved either on the cloud, backed up on another hard drive, accessible by somebody else. So you can always have somebody who's maybe a colleague, maybe a fellow traveler, to be with and have those information and documents as well, right? Or a backup file of that. The last thing that I would want to touch on is making sure that you do whatever you can do within your control to minimize this risk, right? So just being careful, being wary of who's sleeping next to you, who's working around you, your environment, right? Be observant as you're traveling. Don't take things for granted. And yeah, I just want to leave everybody with a positive note is that, I've been traveling for at least majority of my life, but more so now, especially as a digital nomad over the past year, and haven't had one incident. Have at the same time being very protective, making sure that I'm taking photos of things when I leave it. So we do what we can do from our perspective, right? But there are only few things that we can keep in our control. So it's important that you do the things the best manner. Over to you.
Awesome, awesome. That adds more value to what Tushar said as well. So thank you very much again, Ran, on that points. And we have our last question to go ahead with today. So can you just tell us like what legal resources or support that are available for digital nomads and remote workers, and how YVLC especially can help them access to those services? Yep.
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So, with regards to legal resources, it's best to make sure that you're getting online resources that have some sort of validity, right, and backing. So, looking at websites of governments, looking at websites of official news reports. Those are things that you would want to, uh, again, make sure that those are valid ones, not some blog, not some newsletter. Make sure that those are ones that are credible and verified, right? And in terms of other resource, you would want to have legal membership subscriptions. So maybe subscribe to newsletters of leading law firms that are talking about digital nomadism, that are talking about what do you call it, remote work and digital nomad visas, immigration laws and labor laws. Try to do that not only with one or two jurisdictions or law firms in one or two jurisdictions, but from places that are more international, right? The last thing that I would want to say is make sure that you always try to get legal advice, especially before a situation happens, right? Because when it comes to the legal issues, you want to try to prevent it from happening. So, having your contracts reviewed by a lawyer, not when shit hits the fan and you have an issue, but to draft it in the first place is important, right? Similarly, whenever it's like your digital nomad visa or your travel visas, you would want to have either an agent or a lawyer that has that background and has done it multiple times over to even once over your application, right? So YVLC.legal has support services for digital nomads and remote workers, whether it's with regards to reviewing your contracts, to setting up your entities, to drafting agreements with your employers or your clients. We handle all of that, right? So that's kind of what we would want to do. And at the same time, clients of ours have access to the legal resources that YVLC has within our network, which is lawyers in multiple jurisdictions, people who have credible and verified services in multiple jurisdictions, and that they can help ensure that remote workers can access this legal support, irrespective of where they are, in which country they need to enforce their legal rights in. And even if they aren't familiar with the local legal system, that's where we come in with our expertise as well as our local off counsels who are on ground and help with legal issues if and when it were to happen.
And I'll just add that as we speak, I think we are adding more and more of councils in different parts of the world, right? So we are realizing that work could be coming from anywhere and that we need experts in those areas. So we are sort of expanding our off council network as well.
Awesome. That's great to hear what kind of services that actually YVLZ is providing to digital nomads around the globe, experiencing what they want and in the meantime being safe and secure while they're traveling, right? So, of course, the team that who is joining through our LinkedIn Live can subscribe to YVLC newsletters. So then you also can get in touch with latest updates from their end. So, right. So it with that one, Nomad Buddy is now in full gear, and as well as YVLC. So, on behalf of the whole team, we thank both Ryan and Tushar from YVLC for joining us in sharing the valuable insights on legal aspects to be followed while traveling around the globe and working remotely. So, I would like to formally conclude this event with this phrase. So, be like a flower, survive in the rain, but use it to grow. So, no matter the change, we need to get out of the comfort zone and be the change that we wanted to do. And we are standing here and at the shoreline and of the ocean and change with the waves of excitement and uncertainly lapping at our toes. So let us all join hands in making some more remote work and as well as digital nomad experiences all around the world. And once again, I thank Tushar and Ran for being part of this initiative, the Legal 101. And we are looking forward for future sessions as well. And Yeah, so thank you very much. And with that being said, I'm Abdullah Al Bahey, officially signing off. And thank you very much for joining, and have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.
Right. Thank you.